In a study on willpower, participants were asked to fast for 3 hours before the study, and then when they came in, one group was given a plate of cookies and a plate of radishes. And they were told that they were not allowed to eat the cookies at all, but they could eat as many radishes as they wanted. The second group was given the same exact 2 plates, and they were told that they could have as much as they wanted of anything from either plate. After a while, the 2 groups were then given a geometric puzzle to solve. And they didn't know this, but the puzzle was impossible to solve. So the researchers were trying to see which group would persevere on the task the longest before giving up. And group 2, the one who was allowed to eat whatever food they wanted, persisted much longer, significantly longer than group 1, who was supposed to refrain from eating the cookies. And the theory, the hypothesis that was being tested was, does using willpower to refrain from eating cookies make people have less willpower and therefore less persistence in future tasks? And the hypothesis seemed to be correct. There was at least evidence based on this study that that hypothesis was correct. The group 1 had used a lot of willpower to not eat the cookies. And then because they didn't have as much willpower in their willpower reserves, they persisted for less time in the next task. Willpower is genuinely a limited resource. Thankfully, it's a renewable resource, so we can generate more of it and then use more of it, but it depletes and then it takes a while for it to recharge. So because it's limited, we can't rely fully 100% on willpower alone to accomplish our goals and to create lasting habits. But the problem is that typically that's exactly what we do. We focus so much on just depending on willpower. I'm going to will myself to accomplish this goal. I'm going to will myself to develop this new habit. And our willpower gets depleted over time, and then usually we get overwhelmed and give up. So in this time of year when New Year's resolutions are such a big thing, it's so critical that we understand how to develop habits in a way that doesn't depend on willpower, because willpower is so limited and so ineffective very often. And we have to learn how to use systems instead. Systems that help us to succeed in our goals and in the development of habits. So let's talk about this. I'm going to give you 4 tips that'll help you to develop habits that actually last, instead of beginning to develop habits and getting overwhelmed and stopping. Okay, so tip number 1 is first, identify the long-term goal, the behavior that you ultimately want to develop, or the goal that you ultimately want to attain. So that's step number 1. Then tip number 2 is then break that down into a level of it that you can commit to 100% right now without getting overwhelmed. I talked about this a lot 2 episodes ago, so go back to that episode. It's called Start Small to hear more about this in detail. But make sure that you break that ultimate behavior down into something that you can commit to 100% right now without being overwhelmed, so that you can move forward with positive momentum and with excitement about your goal instead of dread about your goal. So for example, let's say your ultimate behavior, so step number 1 is you decide that ultimately what I want to get to is working out at the gym for 45 minutes, 5 days a week, every weekday. That's what I ultimately want to achieve. If you're not really doing anything close to that right now, then you'll want to start much, much, much lower than that. So perhaps you could break it down to, okay, for the first 2 weeks, I am going to commit 100% to going to the gym twice a week for 15 minutes. The amount of time and the frequency will vary from person to person. It depends how much exercise you already do, right? And it depends what feels overwhelming to you versus what feels like not enough to you versus what feels like that sweet spot right in the middle where it's pushing you and it feels happy and exciting, but it's not too much. Okay, then tip number 3 is make unhelpful behaviors, the behaviors you want to get rid of, and helpful behaviors, the behaviors you want to increase, make them harder or easier to do by adding or removing barriers. So with helpful behaviors, with a habit that you're trying to add into your life, make it easier for yourself to do that by eliminating barriers to that habit. There's various kinds of barriers. One big one is simply forgetting. It's common to just forget the habit that we're trying to add. So in order to eliminate that barrier, there's various things that you can try. One that I would recommend is something that James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits that he calls habit stacking. And that just means that when you're wanting to add in a new habit, one that you haven't really done before, pair it with a habit that you already do on a consistent basis. So if you want to begin taking your medication more frequently, for example, pair that with something that you already do every day. Maybe you brush your teeth every day. So put your medication bottle right next to your bathroom sink, and when you go to brush your teeth, that will remind you, now it's time to take my medicine. So do things to build in reminders for yourself. Do it in a way that feels natural, and that will remove the barrier of forgetting. And then on the other hand, we want to do something to divert our attention away from habits that we're trying to get rid of. So behaviors that we want to stop doing, we want to build in a way to stop paying attention so much to that type of behavior, to the cues that lead to those behaviors. So if you're really tempted to eat junk food and you're trying to eat less of it, you want to develop a habit of eating less junk food, put the less healthier foods toward the back of your fridge or the back of the freezer or the back of the pantry, or get rid of them altogether. You'll have to figure out what feels not too big for you, right? But do what feels authentic, but make sure that it's just not right there in front of your face. Do things to make it be less in your attention, right? So forgetting, that's one barrier that we can either add or take away, depending on whether we're trying to add or take away a behavior. Another common type of barrier is time and energy. Time and energy can get in the way of us doing our habits. So if you want to add in a behavior, take away some of the time and energy that it takes to engage in that behavior, and you'll be more likely to engage in it. So for example, if you want to go to the gym 5 days a week for 45 minutes, while you're on your way building up to that, and once you have built up to it, take away some of the time and energy to getting there by laying out your clothes and your shoes the night before so that you don't have to choose your outfit in the morning. When it's a habit that's delicate, that we're really trying to develop and is not ingrained yet, it's really easy for something as simple as, oh man, I have to pick out my outfit for this. For something like that to become a hindrance to us moving forward. We can say, this is just too much today. I think I'm just not going to do it. I'll do it tomorrow. So take away those barriers, the barrier of time and energy, for example. Another barrier that you could take away for time and energy is with food, if you're trying to eat healthier, prepare food or meals or parts of meals on the weekend so that later in the week, it's really easy. It takes less time and less energy to access that healthier food, right? So eliminate that barrier. And then again, with trying to take away unhelpful behaviors, so we're trying to stop a bad habit or an unhelpful habit, what we want to do is make it take more time and more energy to be able to do that behavior. So, for example, let's say that you go on Instagram way too much. You're kind of scrolling mindlessly all the time and you really want to reduce that. Stop saving your password in your phone and exit out of Instagram, log out of it, and then make sure your password is not saved so that every time that you want to get on Instagram, you have to log in, but you also can't even just click on it and then your password pops up. You have to actually type in your password. It creates more time and energy required to get there, so it makes you less likely to do it. So again, tip number 3 is make unhelpful behaviors harder to get to and make helpful behaviors easier to get to by removing barriers or adding barriers. And then finally, number 4 is reinforce your commitment through consequences and rewards. This is a huge one for diminishing the amount of willpower that we actually have to use to engage in our habits. Because if we have consequences that we're going to face for not doing it, and rewards that we get for engaging in our habit, then it's going to take less willpower to do it because we're just kind of motivated to get these rewards and avoid the consequences. So for me, for example, one thing that I was struggling with for a long time was eating too many sweets and snacking too much. And I had literally years up until pretty recently where I struggled with it enough that I was getting really frustrated about it. And I would always try to stop doing it and eat fewer sweets and snack less, but it just kind of never held. It never worked. And as I learned these principles, I began implementing a system of consequences and rewards, and it's made a complete 180-degree difference for me. So I set up the plan to eat 3 meals a day and then just 1 snack, and then I would have treats only in social situations. So on a date with my wife or being with friends or family, things like that. And then instead of just using willpower to get myself to follow that plan, I decided, okay, a consequence that I'm going to have if I break this plan is that I'm going to Venmo $1 to my friend Diggy. So I texted Diggy and I said, hey, I just want you to be my accountability partner if you're willing. Every time I break my eating plan, I'll Venmo you $1. And it's been working so well because instead of just having simply the willpower to stop me from eating sweets, I have that barrier of if I eat these sweets, I'm going to have to Venmo Diggy $1. So it makes it way easier not to do it. And then on the reward side, I chose that my reward will be that every day that I follow my eating plan, at the end of the day, I get to turn on a song and dance with my wife, Beth. We can do a slow dance, we can do a fun, wacky dance, but I love dancing with her. And so she agreed to this, obviously. I'm not forcing her to do this, but with her permission, that's my reward. And I get to dance one song with Beth after each day that I follow my eating plan. And so that gives me huge motivation too, because I'm so excited to dance with her at the end of the day. And it feels like such a fun celebration of having gone another day following my plan. So follow these tips. As you follow these tips, you will use less willpower. You'll be less dependent on willpower. And trust me, Human change and human growth always takes willpower. It's never just so easy, but you'll use less willpower if you create a system around the habits that you are trying to build. If you do that, including starting small and removing and adding barriers and using rewards and consequences, you will develop the habits that you want to develop, and you'll find that it's so much easier than you realized. Thank you so much for listening today. I truly appreciate it. Please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Those are so helpful. Also, please make sure to share this on social media so that others can benefit from it too. Let's go be high performing today.